Hi, welcome back to my channel. Quick recap. Today, I am going to explain Air movie. That is a science fiction thriller film. Watch out and take care. At the beginning of the film, the President of the United States declares to the public that his government is taking all necessary measures to guarantee the preservation of their way of living. The President highlights that the safety of every American citizen is the top priority. The movie later discloses that a catastrophic event related to biochemical weapons has caused the death of most of the world's population and contaminated the air, making it unbreathable. Because of this crisis, the U.S. government has quickly constructed a few temporary underground shelters, where a group of scientists are kept in cryogenic sleep until the toxic air becomes breathable again. A couple of workers are assigned to maintain each bunker and are awakened for 2 hours every 6 months. The following scene introduces us to two workers named Bauer and Cartwright, who are assigned to one of these facilities. Bauer emerges from his pod, feeling nauseous after awakening from his slumber. As an engineer, he proceeds to inspect several computer displays before his co-worker, Cartwright, wakes up. After that, the two workers carry out their usual tasks during the waking period. During their shift, they conduct an air quality inspection and report that the air above ground is still toxic. They become aware that the workers at the other facilities have already checked in. However, they discover that communication between the different facilities seems to be impossible. Cartwright looks through photographs of his loved ones, but Bauer reminds him that they have all passed away. As Bauer passes some data to Cartwright for analysis, they realize that seismic activity has occurred. In response, they decide to check on the other cryogenic sleepers to ensure their safety. While they are doing this, Cartwright looks at a picture of his wife, Abby, and experiences a hallucination where she appears to be with him. Cartwright's vision of his wife prompts him to try and communicate with her, but Bauer is unhappy with this distraction. Cartwright is convinced that the cryogenic sleepers are alive and represent the hope for the future of humanity. He has even devised a formula to calculate the ideal duration for the cryogenic sleepers to remain asleep. According to his calculations, he predicts that the sleepers may need to remain in their cryogenic state for at least 20 more waking periods. However, Bauer complains that their own lives are being wasted for the sake of the survival of the cryogenic sleepers. Unfortunately, just before their 2-hour shift ends, Cartwright's cryogenic chamber catches fire due to the seismic activity that occurred earlier. Cartwright urgently calls out to Bauer to bring the fire extinguisher, but despite their efforts to put out the fire, the cryogenic chamber is destroyed. During the attempt to put out the fire, Bauer ends up injuring his hand, and just as the 2-hour shift ends, the power goes out and the air supply is cut off. Using a torchlight, Cartwright manages to read the manual and discovers that there is an emergency override option available. In a state of panic, Bauer and Cartwright search for the emergency air supply valve and finally locate it, successfully turning it on. Bauer confesses that he is actually married and has 3 daughters, but he had lied about his marital status to be selected for the job, which required unmarried individuals. Shortly thereafter, the power comes back on, the reserve air supply is activated, and the stopwatch is reset for another 2-hour cycle. They quickly head to the storeroom to look for an available sleeping pod. Unfortunately, their search in the current storeroom was unsuccessful, so they must find another location to continue their search for a spare chamber. With the guidance of the map, they manage to make their way to the basement, although Cartwright, who suffers from severe claustrophobia. Thankfully, their efforts are rewarded when they find an available chamber in the basement. They carry it back to the facility and install it. When the setup is complete, Cartwright proposes that he should be the first one to enter the chamber to ensure that everything is functioning correctly. However, Cartwright hesitates for a moment before entering the chamber, so Bauer decides to go first instead. As soon as the pod is activated, Bauer becomes aware of a sound resembling that of something seeping out and realizes that the air within the pod is becoming thin. While Cartwright goes to inspect it, Bauer frantically yells to be released, but his pleas go unheard by Cartwright. Out of nowhere, the chamber malfunctions and pulls Bauer down, ultimately resulting in his suffocation. As he was on the verge of experiencing a painful and fatal death, Cartwright arrives just in time to rescue him by cutting him loose. While freeing him, Cartwright inadvertently destroys the chamber in the process. Due to the unavailability of any other extra chambers within the facility, Bauer strongly urges to eject a sleeping person selected at random, so as to create space for the others. Cartwright declines, asserting that it is their duty to take care of those individuals and ensure their survival. Bauer asserts that their own survival should be given priority over the survival of others. After much reluctance, Cartwright finally gives in and begins contemplating the idea of using morphine to euthanize one of the sleeping individuals. At that very moment, he experiences a different illusion of Abby, who convinces him that there must be an alternative solution. Noticing Cartwright's hesitation, Bauer decides to take matters into his own hands, but Cartwright interferes and reminds him that they are not murderers. Their disagreement escalates into a minor physical altercation, which comes to a halt after both of them become exhausted. Following their examination of the blueprints, they uncover a code, ABC, which pertains to a different facility altogether. According to Cartwright's belief, the ABC facility is located next to their own facility and might have extra parts available. After hearing this, Bauer cautions that accessing the ABC facility would require breaching the airtight seal, which could result in the release of harmful air. Despite being aware of the risks involved, they both understand that the mission is necessary and must be accomplished. Therefore, since there were no alternative options, Cartwright wears a hazmat suit and leaves the facility, while Bauer provides instructions and support through the radio. During the course of Cartwright's journey, he comes across a substantial quantity of blue dust, which Bauer recognizes as a type of airborne contaminant. Bauer also repairs some cameras, which helps to simplify Cartwright's navigation. In the following sequence, Cartwright discovers the entrance to the adjacent facility, but he encounters a problem as the lock is stuck. Nonetheless, with guidance from Bauer, Cartwright ultimately succeeds in gaining access. Upon entering, he is startled to uncover that the facility has been inactive for a significant period, and all the occupants have passed away. After discovering the dire situation of the neighboring facility, Cartwright begins to lose hope about his own chances of survival. However, at that moment, he experiences another hallucination of Abby. Abby encourages him to remain resilient and to persevere until his last breath. At the same time, Bauer guides him towards an air duct situated approximately 10 yards far. Initially, Cartwright is hesitant to enter the air duct due to his claustrophobia, but he realizes that he has no other choice. While making his way through the air duct, Cartwright comes across several dead bodies, intensifying the challenge of the circumstance. The radio signal begins to weaken, prompting Bauer to try and enhance its strength. While searching for a knife, he discovers it in the toolbox instead of where he had initially placed it. This discovery raises his suspicion, prompting him to review the video footage to ascertain how the knife found out in the toolbox. Upon examining the video footage, he was startled to find out that Cartwright had been standing right beside him when he was on the brink of suffocation in the spare chamber. This suggests that Cartwright may have had the intention of trying to end his life, but had a change of heart at the very last moment. At the same time, Cartwright has a feeling that something is not quite right. He eventually arrives at the facility and begins to explore his surroundings. As he gazes out, he notices that the ceiling is opened up to reveal the planet's surface, and to his surprise, he witnesses the destruction of the city due to a nuclear bomb. Cartwright presumes that this must have happened a considerable time in the past. While exploring the area, he comes across the revelation that all of the sleepers' chambers have been destroyed. Even though the computer system had earlier indicated that all the workers at the facility were safe and sound during their previous periods of being awake, it turns out that this information was misleading and only meant to preserve their mental well-being and the illusion of not being alone. After viewing the video footage, Bauer is deeply shaken and declares that the entire system is fraudulent and no one can be relied upon. Cartwright begins to entertain the possibility that they are the only surviving individuals left. Since his air supply is dwindling, he proceeds to make his way back to their own facility. Upon arriving at the door, he triggers the decontamination procedure. Upon entering the facility, he notices Bauer holding a knife and inquires about from where he found it. Cartwright comes to the realization that Bauer is cognizant of the truth and requests to be allowed inside so that he can elaborate. Despite Cartwright's request, Bauer becomes agitated and aims his gun at him, alleging that Cartwright had attempted to take his life. Furthermore, Bauer views Cartwright as a danger not only to himself but also to the sleepers. Since Bauer declines to grant him access, Cartwright, who is low on air, hastily retreats to the ABC facility. At a certain juncture, Cartwright loses his bearings and is unable to locate an exit. Simultaneously, he undergoes another vision of his wife, who indicates the air ducts as the way forward. Amidst these circumstances, Bauer chastises Cartwright over the radio, stating that the betrayal and deception had caused him the most pain. Cartwright chooses to disregard Bauer's comments and presses forward, ultimately finding his way back to his own facility. After taking off his hazmat suit, he endeavors to gain entry to the facility's control room, but Bauer obstructs his path, shaking a gun and issuing a threat to fire on him. Swiftly seeking shelter, Cartwright makes an attempt to plead with Bauer, stressing the possibility that they could be the only surviving individuals. Despite Cartwright's reasoning, Bauer persists in chasing him around the facility, insisting that he cannot permit him to depart as he fears Cartwright may take his life while he sleeps. After a prolonged pursuit, Cartwright finally secures a place of sanctuary within a medical bay, where he obtains a dosage of morphine. He considers utilizing the morphine to kill his colleague, but becomes hesitant and starts to feel uncertain about the plan. While Cartwright is considering his options, Abby materializes before him and asks him to eliminate Bauer before he gets eliminated him. She persuades him that killing Bauer is the only way for them to have a great future together. Encouraged by Abby's words, Cartwright makes his way back to the control room with a gas bottle in hand. Suddenly, Bauer emerges from behind and shoots Cartwright in the shoulder. While Cartwright is wounded and lying on the ground, he displays a picture to Bauer and begs for clemency. As he lies injured on the ground, Cartwright starts to speak to Abby, but Bauer interrupts, yelling that there is no one here. Cartwright takes advantage of a moment of distraction and launches an attack on Bauer, causing him to lose his grip on the gun. Cartwright takes advantage of the situation and quickly escapes from the control room. Bauer retrieves the photo from the ground and heads to the sleeper pods, where he eventually finds its matching photo. Upon discovering that Cartwright's wife is one of the sleepers, Bauer uses it as leverage to coerce him out of hiding. He threatens that if Cartwright doesn't come out, Abby will be killed. Despite the tense situation, Cartwright manages to gain the advantage over Bauer by surprising him and administering a powerful injection of morphine inside Bauer. In a reversal of fortunes, Bauer pivots to face Cartwright with his gun, but soon he relinquishes it, lowering his weapon and collapsing on the floor due to the effects of the morphine. As the morphine begins to take effect, Bauer starts to feel its impact on his body, and he resigns himself to his fate, reconciling with Cartwright. Before losing consciousness, Bauer requests Cartwright to look after his wife, showing remorse for his past actions. After taking care of Bauer's wife, Cartwright enters one of the sleeping pods, and before initiating cryosleep, he reminds himself that he is the sole caretaker responsible for the functioning of the facility. As the story comes to a close, Cartwright awakens once again to continue his duties in the facility, but he is now visibly aged by several decades. The pods housing the sleepers begin to open one after another, waking them up automatically by the facility's system. All of them, including Abby, leave their rooms and travel to the Earth's surface. The film ends with when Cartwright approaches his wife, and the two of them hug somberly after spending so many years apart. Thanks for watching, guys. Hit the like button if you enjoy and subscribe my channel.